Welcome to the Mad Love Your Life show. I'm Mary Dee, the Joy Catalyst, here to be your host and transformation guide. Mad Love is about the mad, making a difference, and love is what we serve up to live a delicious life. My intention is to help you spark new ideas, break limiting beliefs, and align with your deepest dreams and desires. Get ready for laughter, inspiration, and finding your inner roar in every show. Hello, loves. It is good to be back with you. And, I'm thinking and reflecting on this year. It's been such a big year. Can you believe that we are already halfway through it? Isn't that amazing? Some of you may or may not feel that way, but I feel amazing. And the adventures and the travels and just the people in my life, I'm so grateful for. And today, what I want to ask you is, when you go to bed at night, what's on your mind? What is the question, the situation, the thing that prompts your mental gymnastics and leads to any noise or even stories that you begin to create because of that prompt? What reflections are you having and what shows up? I'd love for you to take a minute and think about what's been on your heart. Because I often find that when we ask ourselves this question, it's an opportunity for us to identify what is occupying so much space in our minds and our hearts. So, what is it? What is the first thing that you think about in the morning and the last thing that you think about before you go to sleep? Is it your kids? Is it your work? Is it a relationship? Is it your health? Maybe it's multiple things. What is it for you? Can you also take it a step further and check in with your body? Can you put your hand on a spot that you identify where this feeling might be showing up for you? And maybe you don't even know what the thing is, what the big question is, or you're not completely clear on what's on your mind because so many things on your mind. Maybe it just feels chaotic in there, but you know that you feel it in your body somewhere. That's a really great way to identify how energetically, when we feel something and we have something looming or an unclosed loop, that it's showing up emotionally in our body and our body is letting us know. Some of you may know this for yourself. If you undergo periods of stress and then you end up manifesting getting sick, right? Because you just have so much turmoil, all these things going on, and the body is like, enough, enough, enough. The emotions are like, enough, enough, enough. And it forces you to slow down. And that's part of that reaction. So if any of this is showing up for you, and there's any unfinished business happening in your world, I want you to know that first off, you are not alone. My guess is that you may be experiencing a level of anxiety or a lack of clarity, and what I would define as a level of suffering. And in some cases, you may have had this suffering for so long that it's like the elephant in the room for you. But it's one that's been there for so long because the elephant hasn't been addressed. Maybe there's even a, little, blanket that you throw over the elephant. So it's in the room, but maybe just not wanting to deal with it or not knowing how to deal with it. And so I want to invite you to invite me to help you end that suffering, because first off, I want you to know it's not necessary. Now, I do believe that when suffering shows up, it is our opportunity to sit with it. Growth definitely happens in the uncomfortable spaces. It happens in those moments of discomfort and sometimes sadness and the swing of emotions that can show up also. However, I also believe that you don't have to live with constant suffering. There's two windows of this, right? There's the suffering that shows up that's out of our control. And then there's the suffering that we allow to stick around because we choose to not tell it to leave. Or again, because we don't necessarily know how to make it leave. And the crazy part is that your knowing, your infinite wisdom, your infinite intelligence, it does know. And it's definitely in your court and in your power to decide on when to end that suffering. And when I say that suffering, I mean that suffering that we're choosing. There's a saying that made me laugh out loud the first time I heard it. It made me laugh so hard. And it said everything happens for a reason, and sometimes that reason is we're stupid. And I'm not calling you stupid. I'm not even calling myself stupid, but for sure, there have been some questionable decisions made out of high emotions or traumas or just recklessness that happen in our lives. And it's part of peopling. We are people and we walk, run, soar, jump, and stumble through life. I am a recovering silent sufferer. So the first time I really noticed this pattern was when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I say this because I remember being in the doctor's office after this diagnosis. And before I got home, I said to myself, maybe I'm not going to tell my partner. And maybe I'm not going to tell my family or my friends or my community. I was going to choose to suffer in silence and see if I could quietly take care of eradicating myself of this disease all by myself. And I think that this is a common response. I felt like for myself that I needed to do this because it felt out of alignment and there was shame in being out of alignment. How can someone healthy like me, this is my talking to myself. How can someone healthy like me, I was very self-righteous in my healthiness, get cancer? I was already judging myself. There were also so many things that I didn't know about cancer and disease. But from what I did know, I definitely was in that moment of judgment, and that judgment created shame. And because I also quickly recognized that shame was showing up around it, that was exactly the thing that helped me pivot to, oh, I got to tell everybody. And as soon as I walked in the door, I told my partner right away. And because of his response, which was full of what I would call like ferocious nurturing or ferocious love, it was immediately, well, then we got to take care of this. Like he had just this unwavering resolve of like, oh, well, we got to figure this out. And I loved that because it was a response that gave me relief and reminded me that I was not on my own. Then I told my best friends, and of course, their loving responses were the same. They were supportive, ferociously nurturing. And also, that taught me that in this moment, I would be robbing myself of receiving in a time when I was feeling depleted and like I had nothing to give. And that was one of the most beautiful lessons. It was a lesson of receiving, and the receiving, y'all, is one of the most beautiful parts. So many of us are great givers. We are a go-giver all day long. We're giving fully to our clients. We're giving fully to our children. We're giving fully to our communities. And we forget what it feels like to receive. And I know for many of you, you're like, but I love to give. It feels so good to Yes, it does feel good to give. It feels so good to give. I always want to show up and give and give and give all of it. And I know you do too. And can you make room? Can I make room to let others give and pour in and show up? Because I don't want to rob other people of that same beautiful feeling, of that same offer to be able to give and give fully, because there are so many people in our life that want to give back to us and we don't allow them to because we're too busy being the givers. And so I really want to open that invitation for you today to allow other people to give and pour into you, especially for y'all that are just give givers. Like, it's also okay to receive. It's a good thing to receive. It's how we also give the gift of giving back to others. And it feels so good. And all of us should know the duality and both ends of giving and receiving, because they're both so important and they are equally important in this world that we're living in. And I tell you this story because this pattern for me came up again a few years later. And it has so much to do around the giving and the receiving. And it also helps answer the question around boundaries, because one of the things I find is that oftentimes when we talk and discuss boundaries, it's much easier to set an expectation or a standard in the beginning of a relationship than it is to suddenly show up and have one in the middle of one when things have been operating the way they've been operating. And I've talked a little bit about this before. For those of you who have children, if you have always just let your kids have messy rooms, but then you went to you read Marie Kondo's book and you decided everything needs to be simplified and organized. And now you're trying to create a boundary with your children of like, hey, your rooms must be this level of clean. And they're like, what? We're 15. We've been doing this for 15 years. We've never had to clean our room. Then you're trying to introduce a new boundary where there hasn't been one before. So for them, it's like weird. It's like all of a sudden there's a fence up in the yard that was never there before. Versus coming into a situation where if there was already a fence, then the expectation is clear. Like, we can't go beyond the fence because that's what the fence is for. And so this is the part that's much harder. And it's often why I like to use this one in hiring and in operations when I'm talking to people in leadership roles about their teams. If you've allowed your team to operate a certain way, let's pretend you don't have any rules around time off, or you don't have any rules around work from home hours, then your team doesn't know any better. They're just kind of fly by their pants operating how they're operating because no one's told them what the rules are. So if you suddenly come in and you're like, oh, by the way, I've decided there's rules now, it's so much harder for that team that hasn't been operating in that way to suddenly shift than it is to hire brand new people who know the expectation and know the parameters around work hours and expectations on working from home and vacation time. So this is where often that disconnect can show up, and it can feel weird of like, okay, how do I properly put up these boundaries in a way that feels good for everyone? And sometimes it just doesn't feel good for everyone. So how do we work through conflict? How do we work through the uncomfortableness that we have to sit with in some of these situations? And so the story that I'll tell you is around my marriage, my old marriage, because that marriage actually doesn't exist anymore. And I want to share this story with you because this same situation that I'm telling you about, with a pattern of like feeling any shame around having breast cancer and needing to be supportive, this same shame came along in my own relationship, because I am amazing at relationships. If I can brag on myself for a minute, if any of my friends are listening, I feel like they're all nodding their heads and they're like, yes, Mary is a relationship person. She really knows how to show up for her people, and like she knows how to communicate. She knows how to have conversations, to have hard conversations, to have open conversations, to how to listen, how to hold space, how to be a friend. And this part is so important because what relationship in most of our lives is more important than the one with our partner, with our soulmate, with our spouse, with our person that we're supposed to be doing life with? And that can feel really confronting. And I remember taking a really long and hard look at my marriage. We were getting ready to celebrate 11 years, and it was the end of 2019. We had our anniversary on New Year's Eve. That was our date. And it had really been on my mind that we were about to celebrate 11 years, right? Like, this is milestone. That's a long time to be with one person. And we were dating before that. So this is a long time coming. And in this, I decided that the relationship was not feeling whole. It's the best way I can describe it. It was feeling very mediocre, and it was not feeling to the standard that I would hold to any of my close relationships. And with this, I decided that I wanted to enroll my partner into supporting me, because this is what partners do. And I remember it so vividly because we were outside on the porch, and I turned to him and I said, "Hey, I need to share with you how I'm feeling." And I began to tell him how I've been feeling, that I feel like things are mediocre. And one of the phrases that I said to him was, "I don't believe that I can do another 11 years with you like we just did. Something is going to have to change. And I want you to know that even in this piece, even in this shift that's going on, I really want to enroll you into being part of the shifts and the changes that can take place in order for this to feel good, like we can do another 11 years, but we've got to do it differently. Because if we don't, then I feel like, and I know myself, and I know that one of these days I'm going to show up and tell you that this isn't working and that we're going to need to complete on this." And that's a hard conversation, y'all. But it's an open and an honest conversation. And in order to create some safety, the other part of it was, hey, I do honor and respect this relationship and the time that's already been invested here. And my commitment to this is not that I'm walking out the door tomorrow, but it's that I would like us to genuinely take the time and space to work on this together. And in my mind, that's probably going to take at least the next year. So for me, that timeline looks like it's about a year out of being able to say, can I evaluate the work that we're going to plan on doing together? And I would love for you to come up with some ideas of what these things can look like, because here's where I'm feeling incomplete in our relationship. And also, I have written up some solutions that I think we can also embark on together in order to fix it. And that part to me felt good because I was like, hey, like it's teamwork. We can do this together. We can be a team in all of this. And I really felt like our issues were so fixable. I also really respected our relationship. And that's why I believe it deserved time. It deserved time and effort. It wasn't a instant, okay, I'm going to suddenly be single and be off into the world again and all by myself. It was like, no, like I want my marriage. So wanting it means, how do I show up and make a choice? How do I make more choices here? I was telling you all about my experience in Dom and Her last week. And one of the things that I loved about that community is that when they marry, they actually opt into that marriage every year instead of how we do it as a nation, which is we stay in it and then when we're done, we opt out. So in Dom and Her, they actually have a ceremony every single year. So they actually choose to marry each other every year. And this was such a funny conversation because I asked one of the ladies, I was like, well, what happens if someone doesn't want to renew? She goes, well, it actually happens quite a bit. She says sometimes people get together, they marry, and they marry every year. And then one of the years they're like, I don't feel like being married to you this year. Like it's not working. Like maybe we need to go our separate ways for a while. And literally sometimes that happens. Like it'll end for like a year or two and then they get married again. And I thought, wow, what a beautiful reframe around relationships, because I feel like if that was the way it worked, if that was the way we were taught and the way it showed up, we all may show up differently if we weren't sure if our spouse was going to renew those vows the next year. And I feel like that's the bigger step, right? And that was part of, hey, let me come in and establish some boundaries in my own relationship that are going to feel good for me and good for my partner, ideally, right? Because I'm not showing up saying that I've done everything right. And that was the other thing that I did in that conversation is I said, hey, I will own that there are some ways that I have also like kept down the fence, right? Like suddenly I want to put up a little bit of a fence on some things, but this whole time that fence has been willy-nilly up and down. It hasn't been a sturdy fence. And so for you all that might be parenting also, where have you been moving the fence with your kids, with your work, in your own relationships with your clients? Like there's so many ways that all of us move our fences. We don't always have those boundaries up in a way that's solid. And that can be confusing. It can be confusing for the other person, and it can be really frustrating for us internally. So as I'm telling you this story, the next thing I'll say is in my mind, I thought, well, we're going to work on all this stuff over the next year. It's going to be roses and on I go. Except what happened is the pandemic came. All of you probably remember the pandemic. Remember that blip of time where we all lived in a really weird society that we really felt like was from some like strange movie about an apocalypse that we didn't know we were living in. Well, the pandemic came, and the window of a year that I had in my mind turned into a 3-year window. And that window was so full of conflict, a conflict of feelings. I still wanted my marriage, but I didn't want it to be mediocre. Again, wasn't mediocre in any other area of my life. So why would I settle for it in love? And y'all, it was hard, but it was through these years that I learned so much. And I can look back at it with such gratitude because of what I went through in the pandemic, of being in this relationship where I really can't go anywhere else. And now I'm very much with this person 24/7. It was in those times where it got so crystal clear to me of all the things that were misaligned. And that was painful. It was painful. It also helped me reflect on the fact that I had been doing some bypassing. And my bypass was in that I traveled for work all the time. But I didn't just travel for work. I'd travel for work and then I would extend my stay before and after with my friends, with my family, with other people. And I took a lot of trips without him, and some of those were his opt out. And because of that, I realized that was my way of being away from home and being out of the energy of any of that conflict and mediocreness into just living my best life. So I'm having this sort of parallel life happening at the same time. But because being away is a big chunk of my life and being able to travel and go to events and do all that stuff, it was easy to like not give this the nurturing that it fully needed. And then when I wanted to nurture it and sit with it, I was really, really stuck with sitting with it. And the things I sat with were very, very uncomfortable. And I want to first share with you some of those frameworks because I think it can be so helpful for helping anyone else that is going through this same situation. And I'm telling you this situation in the framework of a relationship that's ending. But this can also be in a work relationship that's ending. It can be in a career that you want to shift out of. It can be in just transitioning from childhood to adulthood. And what does adulting mean? Like, when do we wake up one day and we're adults? Because there's no real defined line around some of those things, and some of them are surprises. Some of us believe that we might go to school or collect a trade and make a decision to do one thing only to decide suddenly we want to do something else, and that's okay. Like, we don't have to be on some little mouse wheel of life. We can get off of it and choose to like not even be in the mouse cage at all. We can go over to the bunnies, we can roam free with the wolves, we can do all the things. And so the things that I learned through this were how to have radical, uncomfortable, but honest situations that still respect the relationship. How to create healthy boundaries and standards, how to enroll and count on community for emotional support, how to decide on how do I take the next step, how to get really clear. Am I staying in this thing or am I going to move forward? And if I'm going to move forward, what does that look like? Redefining what it means when a partnership ends. So a lot of times I hear people say, oh, my marriage failed. Or, hey, I have shame around this because I will be the only one in my family who has a marriage that's failed. And I want to give you an opportunity to lean into that and choose. Is it a failure? Or is it just complete? Is there a lesson that needed to happen there? Because most of the time, there are for sure lessons. I'd say absolutely there are lessons. And sometimes those lessons are there as our opportunity to heal. And this is also our action item or our call to action to take the healing that happened in this relationship that's complete so that we don't take any of the same traumas and the same challenges into our next potential relationship. Also, our relationship with ourself. What did our relationship with ourself show us in that time and space? And how can it be the teacher that we need to move forward more powerfully in our next relationship with ourself, in the next chapter that we do with ourself? Also, how do we mediate? How do we work through the conflicts that come up? We had conflicts around the furniture, the dogs, the money. And you know what? Because those showed up and because the standing value was to create respect and love for the fact that this has been my chosen partner for all this time, this is where those values were able to come into play to help create and get us through the conflicts around furniture and dogs and money. And then lastly, how do we powerfully shift out of the relationship? And this is the part that I feel like gives me the most joy and the most gratitude when I think about it, and just the love that really fills me, because I actually appreciate some things about my old partner even more now than I did when we were married. I definitely appreciated them when we were married, but I have a deeper level of love for those certain things because I realize how many of those things that he was able to bring to the table were his special sauce. And it's so good when we can recognize the special sauce in other people. I will also say that I'm still clear that that was the right thing for us. It was the right thing for us. And I see it in how he's living his life now and the joy that he's been able to create in his life, separately from me needing to be part of his day to day. And the same for me. So, my ex and I, for those of you that don't know, we are actually still really good friends. He's still a very big part of my life in terms of being a friend. And, if I have something goes wrong with my car, like I know I can rely on him to come help me or help me troubleshoot. If he needs me to babysit his dogs, like I'm on it. So it's the beautiful part of rolling all of that, of what it was, into just a different package. And now we get to move forward differently and navigate some of the discomfort that also comes with, ooh, what is it like when my partner sees me with a different man? Right? Because there's also that piece of it. And so it's learning through all of these things. How do we really consciously know that we're no longer a couple, but we are still friends, or there's a relationship there? And in some cases, for some people, it may be that there doesn't need to be a relationship there. And I honor that boundary as well. For so many of you, though, you have children, dogs, maybe businesses, or other things that really still tether you. And instead of it having to be this like constant, like, I hate you, you're terrible, you're the worst, how do we remember that, like, we chose this person and they chose us? There was love there. We may have procreated with this person and made wonderful children. Like, navigating through all of those pieces can be a really rough ocean. And so I share all of this with you because as things move forward, and for those of you that have heard me talk about it, I've opened up MADLOVEOLOGY, and this is going to be 2 retreats this year. I'm so excited about having you come join me for a weekend and nourishing you, working through all these frameworks with you, and helping you devise your own plan of action to move life forward, to talk to the elephant in the room, to dress the elephant, and then find a way to also send the elephant out the door. And for some of you, you may be saying, well, Mary, I don't know for sure that my relationship is ending. Like, I still feel like there could be some things we work through and I want to do that. Then I say, fantastic. Let's talk through that. Like, let's make a next step for you, because too many of us are silent suffering, and we're suffering in this area and we don't feel like there's anyone to talk to. There may be traditional routes, like trying to go to a counselor with your person and trying to get both of you, that kind of work. And that work is good work. It can be. And also, sometimes it feels really disjointed for the other person. So, how can we show up to love and honor our relationship for each other? And how can we at least start to have those conversations? So, I want to invite you to community. I want to invite you to the best practices, the things that I know have worked really beautiful, and ways to navigate this hard subject, and to not have to do it alone. That is the most important part of this, because it's not necessary to do it alone. There are so many other people just like you who want to have that conscious decoupling, and there's a way to do it, and there's a right way to do it, and there's a way to do it feeling honored, even if the other person isn't ready to show up that way as well. That's a really, really, really important distinction to make, but we talk about that. So with that, I want to just again, invite those of you who really feel this message and feel like it's for you, to have a conversation. You can go over to marydee.com. That's MARYDEE.com. You can grab more information about the MADLOVEOLOGY Retreat coming up. Registration is open for our June 20th cohort, which is less than a month away. And then we already have a wait list for the October 3rd through 6th dates. And if I need to squeeze another one in there, I certainly will. It's a small group. We do these in really small, beautiful, curated retreats. And I have a book for you forthcoming and some coursework to make all of this really round out and come together for those of you who are like, hey, I'm ready to tackle this now. I don't want to wait another month. And I'm looking forward to speaking to those of you who feel the call and feel like this could be a great fit for you. So with that, I can't wait to see you back here next week. I will be coming back from the CMA festival, taking my bestie and going to have a good time. For those of you that don't have festivals in your life, I encourage you to get your groove on. They're a lot of fun and you meet a lot of interesting people and you just get to be in the energy of some music and have a great time. And until next time, may abundance always walk beside you. May joy always go before you, and may love always guide you on your path. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. We air live every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Bold Brave TV. We hope to see you back next week. For more ways to connect with my guests, content, programs, and retreats, just head over to www.marydee.com and subscribe. That's MARYDEE.com.